Okay, everybody, welcome to the Poquoson City Council work session that was scheduled for 6:30. We're sorry we're a few minutes late. We're having some coffee issues that delayed us in getting started. But now that we have worked through those, we're ready to proceed on with an ordinance regarding storage yards. And Randy?
Mr. Mayor, Kevin's going to present for staff, but as you know, we're constantly looking at rub points in our land use ordinances, and one of the issues that has been a concern to several of our businesses that operate on the fringe of the business area, in the residential area as well as some non-conforming businesses, or non-conforming land uses, let me clarify, it's been storage yards. And we've had some real-life examples of people that have struggled, continue to struggle. And so we re-looked at that ordinance, and as we do whenever we've got a significant proposed change, as opposed to some sort of housekeeping change, we like to come here first and explain to you what we're thinking, ask for your thoughts and advice on whether or not you'd like it to move forward as presented with amendment or not move forward at all. And with that, I'll let Kevin briefly walk you through, first starting with why we looked at it, and then through the proposed change, please.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. Mayor and honorable members of council, over the past month, we've really dug into this aspect of our ordinance, which would essentially allow storage yards to skip the conditional use permit process in order to expedite the development process for them. Right now, storage yards, lumber yards, contractors' yards, uses of that nature are permitted in the B2 district, which is basically the With Creek Road corridor, provided they go through the conditional use permit process. This process typically takes 60 to 90 days, depending, and was just another hurdle in the development process. So with that being said, we've really looked at our ordinance. We really looked at defining storage yards. What are storage yards? What do we want included as a storage yard? And we've come up with a concept at this point. And tonight we're looking for a consensus from council whether to move forward with this language. And if we do move forward, certainly open up some discussion points and things that you'd like included in the language, specifically because this wouldn't be, I don't want to call it a by right use, it would be a conditionally by right use. A little different than, I think, anything we've done in the ordinance in the past. We would have predetermined sets of conditions that these storage yards would have to meet to bypass the conditional use permit process. So with that being said, it's not terribly different than the sheds on a vacant lot that you'll hear later during your regular session. It would be a twofold change. First, we would have to define storage yards. And this is just a mock definition, certainly can be changed. But we would define them as a yard area in which materials, equipment, and/or vehicles used for construction, excavating, landscaping, freight, or similar activities are stored, kept, and/or maintained. Storage yards may operate as a primary or an accessory use and may be partially covered, enclosed, or screened. Personally, when I think of a storage yard, I think of whether it be a plumbing or electrical contracting business where you have a little retail aspect to it, and in the back they keep the larger materials and store their fleet, if you will. So that's kind of what this definition is catered to. It can certainly be expanded to include various other activities. But taking that definition, we would have to then implement allowing them in our B2 district, which is a simple change. We would just add it as a by right use, and once again, conditionally by right. And the biggest part of this ordinance is the conditions that we predetermine for them. Storage yards have the potential to negatively impact neighbors, adjacent properties, really through aesthetics and noise. And we want to minimize those, especially with the eastern side of our B2 district abutting residential single-family zones. So with that being said, we've come up with, at this point, 9 conditions, and like I said, this could certainly be fine-tuned, expanded, or shrunk if necessary. And some of these may, I don't want to say sound redundant, but they're things that would be necessary anyway. We've just thrown them in here. For instance, number 1, all site design standards shall be met. That's a given. However, we want to make sure no one believes that storage yards are exempt from these ordinances. Storage yards are a little different animal. We just want to reiterate the fact that other aspects of our ordinance apply. So the conditions that we would apply to these at this time would be, like I said, all site design standards shall be met. Number 2, storage yard is to be screened from public view. I believe this is probably the biggest part of the conditions and the most important. The storage yard is to be screened from public view on all sides by solid wood, painted metal or masonry fencing, and/or mature vegetation suitable for the purpose of screening with a minimum height of 6 feet, not to exceed 8 feet in height. All required screening shall be continuously maintained in good condition to assure that its intended purpose is accomplished. This requirement may be waived by the zoning administrator based upon unique site conditions. As we know, no 2 sites are exactly the same. Some may be naturally screened by putting a building in front and have a mature vegetated buffer in the back. So we do have the ability to waive that. Number 3, for uses abutting residential districts, this would be almost all the parcels on the eastern side of Wythe Creek Road. No outdoor activity may be conducted between the hours of 8 p.m. and 6 a.m. Those were the numbers that personally I just felt appropriate, sleeping hours, if you will. Number 4, the storage yard shall be surfaced in accordance with the city site plan ordinance. Number 5, material kept within a storage yard must be screened at 100%. Equipment and vehicles kept within the storage yard must be screened at 55%. 55% is an interesting number, and I'll tell you how we got to that. Originally, we were thinking 60% for vehicles, excavating equipment, because they're 12, 15 feet high sometimes. Standard 53-foot long tractor trailer stands at about 13 and a half feet tall. If we allow them to put up an 8-foot fence, they could screen 59% of it. So with that in mind, we elected 55%, which allows them to screen 55% of that tractor trailer, if you will, instead of requiring them to do 60%, which would throw that out the window. Number 6, vehicles and equipment kept within storage yards must be kept in good repair and working condition. Abandoned and/or unlicensed vehicles or equipment will not be permitted. I believe this one's important because we do not want storage yards to be construed as junk yards. There's certainly a difference. Storage yards will be operating in conjunction with a business, an active business, a licensed business. Number 7, when a storage yard is proposed within the city's architectural review district, which is within 300 feet of Wythe Creek Road, approval must be granted by the Architectural Review Board pursuant to Article 11.3 of the zoning ordinance. I believe this is very important, and while also a given, storage yards aren't necessarily in line with the Architectural Review District. Some of these we hope would be set back 300 feet from Wythe Creek Road, but if they're not, they would still have to go before that process, and I think that's something important that they need to know up front. 8, if any of the aforementioned conditions cannot be met, a property owner may file a conditional use permit pursuant to Article 1, Section 1-7 of the zoning ordinance. Basically, if they don't meet any of these conditions, they can certainly go through the conditional use permit process, like currently. And lastly, but not least, other conditions may be determined by the zoning administrator as they are deemed necessary. Like I said before, no 2 sites are the same. Unique characteristics often present themselves. So with that being said, we're looking for a consensus to move forward with this language. And honestly, the ideas and suggestions you may have for this language to strengthen it moving forward before we get to the Planning Commission process in March is certainly welcomed.
I have a question.
All right.
Are there existing storage yards in the city that's under permit that you can give us an example of?
Under permit, I believe we have some grandfathered uses currently, and Debbie's much more familiar with that.
Where one might be that I can kind of relate to and see, have like a picture of what I'm talking about.
Okay. We have the Purdue site adjacent to Carol Moore's property is one.
Oh, okay.
That would be more of a building materials site. They have a lot of soil stockpiles there.
O.J. Smith's place on the corner there.
O.J. Smith's currently, a gentleman's keeping tractor trailers there, storing them.
Oh, God, just let him go to.
That'd be another one.
A couple of questions. In number 4, you said the yard shall be surfaced. Now, is there any consideration whether it's pervious, impervious surfaces? There's been some concern in the past where you might have runoff into residential yards or into the storm drains, and so when it says surface, is there any thought to impervious or pervious surfaces?
It would be, what our site plan ordinance says right now, I believe, is a Portland concrete or an asphalt material, or with the discretion of the city engineer, a pervious material may be used, whether that be gravel or pavers or something of that nature.
I remember we looked at a development one time where they were using some kind of special, proposed some special surface that was a pervious material, okay? And I didn't know if that would be allowed. And the other one says that unlicensed vehicles. Now, there may be a case where they might have forklifts or something like that in the storage yard. Are they licensed vehicles?
I believe they are. I believe if they're paying machinery taxes on those would have to be licensed through us.
So you don't actually mean a license plate, you mean just that they're
Yeah,
licensed?
Registered.
absolutely. Yeah,
They're
registered with the
registered.
Commissioner of
Okay.
Revenue's office.
All right,
Yeah.
that's where I was coming from. I
Yeah.
don't remember seeing a license plate on a tow motor.
Kevin, I just had a few comments. Under 3, the time, I remember we had one car wash that was right in people's backyards, and we allowed them to operate until 10. I'd just like to suggest that we do it from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m.
Okay.
The other one is in number 5. I don't know about the rest of you, but I was totally confused with that. Maybe we should put some wording in there that alludes to height.
Okay.
'Cause I'm thinking, okay, we've already said they've got to screen the whole thing, but then we tell them they can screen it 55%. So that, in that one, you're referring to height, correct?
Yeah, when we're referring to, when we talk of material, we're talking like soil stockpiles.
Right.
And then those have to be screened at 100%.
Right.
Equipment and vehicles, whether it's an excavator or a tractor trailer, wouldn't have to be screened at 100%, they would have to be screened at 55% of their height.
You say 50, you
Of
say
their
height.
Yes, sir.
When I was reading that, I'm thinking it conflicts with number 2, that already says you've got to screen the whole area.
Okay. We can do that. We can,
And the other thing is, and this is probably not going to make me real popular, but I would like to see 7 struck altogether. I don't think storage yards have anything to do with the Architectural Review Board.
okay.
I mean, we're not talking about building, we're not talking about mass, we're not talking about how it fits on the lot or anything like that. I just think that's kind of out of their purview.
But we are talking about what our city looks like.
Exactly.
But in going on that, because I had the same comment written down, we don't have any standards that we've given to the ARB for them to enforce on a storage yard. So I don't want to recreate the wheel one business at a time. So unless we're prepared to give some type of standards, the ARB really doesn't have anything to judge a storage yard by. So I kind of agree on that as far as my personal opinion. Is there any reason why you only picked B2?
The reason at this time is because this is the only district that they're allowed with a conditional use permit currently. Specifically allowed with a conditional use permit there. They could be permitted anywhere in the city because we do have a clause in our zoning ordinance that allows developers to petition city council for a conditional use permit if their use is not specifically permitted within any district within the city. But the B2 district is the only district that specifically cites these types of uses as allowed. The general commercial district, which is, there's a small piece on With Creek Road, and there's a larger piece in the Big Woods North. It's catered more towards the brick and mortar retail aspect of commercial. This is more of an industrial use in its nature, and we don't have a true industrial district within the city to permit it. We have the Research and Development District, but once again, that's more of a campus-style industrial park-like development or zone.
I may be on the minority on this, and my buddy talked about number 3, but that car wash is no longer there, right? Is that car wash is gone?
That was
operating
built.
to-
No, we're
It
talking
was
about a
built.
different one that's never been built.
Because I think, I like the 8 to 6. I personally think 6 is a little early, but I know these businesses got to get going early. But if you live in one of these residential neighborhoods and you got kids sleep at 6 a.m., babies sleep, and you fire up one of them big old tractor trailers, which I've had happen to me, that can make somebody too happy. 6 a.m. is kind of early.
I was reading it backwards. I was thinking.
Are you concerned about the 8 PM or the 6
I'm
AM?
concerned about both. I think 8 probably is fine, but I think 6 is too early. I think 10 is too late, and I think 6 is too early. I think 8's a good time.
My only comment on that is in the summertime, 8 PM, it's not even dark.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, it is this time of year, and we get used to the short days. But in the later times of the year, it's really not dark until after 9. So I think that's kind of the way we had gone in the past
That's
is,
fine, if that's what it is. I'm just looking out, if I was a resident and lived behind one of these places, and I'm trying to put kids down at 8, 9 o'clock, and they're bringing in tractor trailers and stuff like that, that's my only thought on that. And 6 a.m., I get up early, I'm up before that for the most part, but that's just a thought. It's kind of early.
is there any thought process in your mind, Kevin? I mean, we're getting ready to talk about things later on tonight about water-related businesses, because I can see them wanting storage yard uses later on. That's why I asked the question about B2. In your marina overlay districts, I can see some things that fit storage yard uses. And I want to make sure, you know, if there's some words back here in the other ones about, that we'll be considering later on this evening, about if you're in the RPA and it's a water-related use, then that may be acceptable. I'd just like to make sure that you leverage whatever you've got in the back of tonight's to be in here as well.
Okay.
Okay, and that's my chief concern is it only B2? And we can let the planning commission do this detail look. I have no problem saying, take it on to planning with, here's some recommendations, and let planning hack out the details. But I certainly don't want to shortchange it, not do the due diligence, and then next thing you know, we need it in general commercial, and we've got to start the whole process again. So if they're going to look at it, I want them to look at it for the other business zones as well. And if they say that's not their recommendation, then we'll consider that.
We have a couple of railway construction areas for boats where they haul boats and do work, and they put them up in storage areas to work on them that fits in that same venue that you're talking about. And I don't know that they're in the B2 district either, are they?
Not unless they're grandfathered somehow or another, but
Some of our marinas are in the B2. And there's, in fact, most of our waterfront areas, White House Cove, Amory's, Messick, that's all B2.
okay.
Okay, what about off of Browns Neck Road and down at the end of,
Put a B2, you mean they put a fence around the whole marina?
no, down close to Lodge Road to Rollins Boatyard?
The Browns Neck is B2, and the Rollins one, I'm sorry,
Yeah, Rollins Boatyard, they,
Corner Bunning Lane and
Bunning Lane.
Church Road.
Bunny Lane and Church Road.
That would be a grandfathered use.
I'm sure that's a grandfathered use that's surrounded by
Grandfather, that's been
residential.
there for 75 years, probably.
I think what we're hearing is that the shell of the document is okay to take to the Planning Commission, and among other things that the Planning Commission will look at, the council would like them to look at, and please stop me if I'm overgeneralizing, the specific hours of operation for increasing or decreasing or right-sizing. Also, whether or not it should be applied to more than just this zoning district. And there was a suggestion, at least a couple of you nodded, maybe all of you, with regard to the ARB. Just so we're clear, the ARB doesn't have jurisdiction over whether or not there's a storage yard. It would have jurisdiction over what it would look like. If you don't want that to be that way, what we can do as part of this referral is study if there would be any changes required to the current enabling language for the ARB and maybe even examine state code, I don't know. But we'll look at that to see if that can be done, and if so, how it could be done, and present that back at the same time.
Yeah, I'm not sure I fully understand their function, but I think that's kind of like a last check for aesthetics, and I think that's a good thing, personally.
The last thing was within the RPA. I want to make sure that we look, especially for waterfront businesses, if we're storing boats within the RPA, I think that's an acceptable use in a storage yard, on a trailer or whatever. I just want to make sure that whatever, like I said, we're going to see some language this evening that talks specifically about what you can and cannot do in an RPA. And I want to make sure that we don't shortchange ourselves as we move forward. And the Planning Commission, with everything you said, I'd like them to consider that as well.
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely. Anything else you'd like us to put in the hopper on this or take out? All right, well, thank you. Thank you, Kevin. We
Thank
look
you.
forward to seeing this back in 60 or 90 days.
Thank you, and again, thank you for doing what you're doing, which is being proactive and looking at our ordinances in a new light. So, thank you for that. All right?
Thank you.
All right, adjourn this work session.